Gildan Media presents Your Coach in a Box, affordable, life-changing audio programs.
The Body Language of Dating. Read his signals, send your own, and get the guy. By Tonya Reiman. Introduction. Attraction. It's biological, it's physical, it's chemical, it's mental. But it doesn't end there. It's also detectable, manageable, maneuverable. Attraction cannot be held in your hand. It can't be displayed in a storefront, nor can it be bottled and sold. In fact, attraction may be one of the last true intangibles left in the world. But don't let it fool you. It really does exist. And with that existence comes your very own ability to harness its power. Within these pages, you'll not only discover how to display the body language necessary for making solid dating connections, you'll also learn about man himself, his origins, his evolutionary journey, the purpose of his form, and how he differs from us. In the first half, you'll become acquainted with the human male. In the second, you'll learn how to make the acquaintance of a fine specimen, chosen by you. By learning about the evolutionary background of man, you'll come to understand his nonverbal signals while using your own silent messages to tug on his emotional mind strings. Much of my wondering about the workings and nuances of attraction began on a rather nondescript evening at home. The television humming in the background, the babes resting like angels in their beds, and my husband, Kenny, sitting across from me at the kitchen counter, carefully spreading peanut butter onto fresh, soft white bread. At that moment, as I studied his full head of thick hair, his watchful eyes that traced the knife's path along the edge of his carefully drawn peanut butter line, his sinewy forearms as he pressed the blade of the knife into the sandwich to cut it, the twinkle in his eye as he extended half to me, I wondered, why did we choose each other? Of course, I knew why I married Kenny. I found in him the qualities that I knew I wanted in a lifelong mate, a father, a lover, and a companion. But before those qualities were made evident, physical attraction played a significant role in our story. Whether Kenny realized it or not, I sat across from him that night and dissected every inch of his face. His lightly arched eyebrows, his boyish grin, the angle of his shoulders, the dark wavy hair that fell haphazardly toward his right eye, even his earlobes. All of these things I loved, because I loved my husband. But what did these features say to me when we first met? Did I consciously hear their messages, or was the majority of what they said subliminal? What made his face handsome to me? Why had I passed up faces that were just as handsome but less something? What was it? Maybe even more importantly, what drove him to choose me? The days, months, and years following the dissection of my poor dear husband have led to this. A book that answers the dozens, maybe hundreds of questions that I had, and many other women still have about the intricacies of human attraction. Because Kenny and I chose to ride the flow of inborn chemical, sensory, and visceral reactions that human evolution had gifted both of us, we found each other. Despite the argument that physical appearance doesn't matter, it was largely responsible for bringing us together. We didn't invent the dance, we simply performed it. When Kenny and I shook our tail feathers in that ancient, complicated mating dance, which had been choreographed over millions of years, we may not have realized that what we were participating in was an integral part of why the human species has survived for so long and so heartily. In another time, Kenny could have been wearing nothing but a boar-bone nose ring and a scrap of mammoth hide when he sauntered over to my cave to rustle up some crocodile stew with a side of spicy blonde. I wouldn't have needed to utter a sound, a whistle, or a grunt while I served up a healthy portion of knowing glances, hair-tossing, and backside brandishing. Sure, fashion trends and the inclination toward hair removal may have evolved, but the human mating ritual stopped its transformation when it started succeeding in populating the earth. What has changed is the human connection to that mating formula. There are those of us who seem to have been born with an innate sexual instinct, and those of us who have not. However, the news is better than good. The formula for dating and mating success can be taught, and it can be learned rather easily because every one of you has the ability to dance the dance. It's not difficult. You simply haven't been taught the steps, or maybe you haven't acquired the skills necessary for bridging from one step to the next. As we tour the world of dating and mating, you'll learn to define attractiveness. You'll learn to understand why, even though the situation annoys you like a rattling dashboard, you can't seem to look away when the shirt comes up. You'll get a good handle on why the doctor who's pursuing his degree in massage therapy and holds a propensity for gift-giving can't shimmy your shaker like the unemployed semi-amateur wrestler who's been living on your brother's couch for 8 months. You'll stop for a moment right between stuffing yourself into skinny jeans and choosing between Cherry's Jubilee and Crimson Passion for your lips to consider the question why. Why do you crush your toes into indiscernible knobs in the name of 4-inch heels? Why do you ask your hair to compete for the title of 8th wonder of the world? Right after you gather answers to those questions, we'll explore the reasons that you want to wrestle with worthless on your brother's couch, along with the equal but opposite reasons that your mother keeps pushing you to accept another invitation from the good doctor. You'll learn to answer questions like, do men think? With statements like, men do think, just differently. You'll learn why you're more concerned with the placement of the TV than what's on it, why you can smell his sweat socks from the kitchen but he hasn't commented on the aroma of your pot roast, and why you can't remember where you parked at the mall but he can rattle off the location's longitude, latitude, and elevation above sea level. You'll uncover the intriguing and often infuriating games that a man might play to mark you as a sure thing and to grant himself permission to sow sperm like a farmer on speed. You'll creep into his brain and find real answers about why his sex life might be more like the express lane than a stroll through the country market, and why for some men the number of women they bed is more important to them than the game score, weight, age, or cholesterol numbers. It won't be long before you're discovering the mystery of nonverbal communication. You'll finally have an answer as to why 2 men can say exactly the same thing, but one leaves with a slap mark on his face, while the other leaves with crimson passion on his. You'll learn to listen to what his facial expressions, gestures, and posture are saying to you about his state of mind so that you can turn over some sexually transparent messages of your own. You might know that a miniskirt won't complement Father's homily and that a turtleneck will never get you past the velvet rope, but the real question is this. Is the way that you're presenting yourself directly complementing your dating intentions? If you're dressed like a one-night stand, you probably won't get a second. If you're dressed like June Cleaver, you'll never get a first. When you're calculating the amount of time you've spent chasing men, do your eyes spin like a Vegas slot machine? You can save yourself from not interested Nate and stalker Steve and carefully land somewhere in the middle by learning to read some simple verbal and nonverbal cues from men. You can use your newfound dating and courtship tactics to play into the preferences you'll uncover to attract his attention. You'll also learn why and how staying just out of his reach can drive up your sexual and reproductive price tag, even when other females are falling victim to the bear market. If humans could greet every prospective mate the way that Spot greets Rover, we might be able to redefine speed dating. But since armpit and crotch sniffing are generally frowned upon, we can look to science for proof that human pheromones are more than a sideshow at the dating carnival. They are a main attraction and should not be discounted in dating chemistry. By the time you finish reading this book, you will not only be able to firmly grasp the evolutionary reasons for the appearance and ultimate sexiness of the male form, but you'll also be able to grasp the importance of playing up your own assets. You'll grasp the role that touching, conversation, and paralanguage play in making connections. You'll grasp an innate radar that gives you the power to decode men's dating games while holding a few in your personal arsenal. And finally, you'll be able to literally grasp that man in your hands, hold him tight, and use everything you've learned to make him a prisoner of his own free will. Kenny and I were drawn to each other with magnetic force. Our chemistries and a few well-timed interactions triggered the transformation of basic attraction into something beautiful. Are you willing to leave your romantic future to fate, or luck, or the stars? I didn't think so. Join me, take the wheel. I'm going to give you the skills that you'll need to drive your love life home. Chapter 1. The Chiseling of Man. How Evolution Has Carved the Familiar Form of the Human Male. Long ago, the returning sun rose over the horizon to give definition to the grassy plains of a sweeping savanna, to four-legged creatures grazing, chasing, and being chased, to winged beings swooping across the sky in search of insects that swarmed around. A vastly different, strangely unique creature. Like a bird, he stood on two legs. Like an ape's, his musculature was defined and formidable. Like the most cunning of predators, he swept his surroundings with his gaze, his defenses and reflexes sharp. Like the most vulnerable of prey, he stood unprotected upon the harsh, unforgiving plains of what would one day be known as Africa. But unlike anything else that had ever stamped itself upon that sunrise, he stood taller than most of the savanna's four-legged creatures. Two of his feet were not feet at all. In fact, they had long, independent digits. His fur was concentrated, creating a wild and unruly silhouette on his head above a body that was utterly hairless and naked. His shoulders were wide, his legs were long, his appendages and extremities unlike any yet supported by this vast bio-network. As strange as early man must have seemed, a unique characteristic still lay hidden beneath that tuft of unkempt yet useful hair on his head. His brain would serve as his largest and most effective weapon, his ally in modernization, and his sexiest of organs. Because his environment would demand more and more of his brain, man's face and stature would change in order to survive. The changes that have occurred in man's face and body over millions of years make that early man recognizable to us, but far from familiar. Evolution is a term that's loaded with controversy for some, with answers for others, and with a taboo-type intrigue for the rest. To understand the concept of evolving characteristics, you must first consider the many variations of the human form. There are tall statures and short ones, flat ears and those that seem to fear the head, blue eyes and brown eyes, red hair and blonde, big noses, broad shoulders, full lips, and skinny hips. Every human face and every body is unique. Evolution is not something that happened autonomously or without reason. It wasn't some kind of magical transformation in which bodies morphed in cut time while the rest of creation stood and watched in awe. Instead, evolution occurred over millions of years as humans effectively eliminated, through mating choices, the bum traits that could have resulted in the extermination of our species. Clearing up an evolutionary ambiguity. Humans and apes are genetically comparable because they share ancestral similarities. Your 16th cousin, Jethro, isn't the only ape you have little in common with. In a relative sense, even though the genetic similarities between humans and great apes are more stunning than many of us would care to admit, humans are still vastly different, more complicated, more intelligent, and more spiritual than the animals that may or may not put Cousin Jethro's sophistication to shame. Evolution can be viewed through any number of lenses. It can be perceived as something that occurred to assure our species' survival, as a byproduct of sexy mating choices, or as the result of random genetic drift. The facet of the theory on which your beliefs rest can only be determined by you. But no matter your position, the evidence that points toward evolution is difficult, if not impossible, to deny. Today's men, on average, are 30% stronger than their female counterparts. Males generally carry about 12.5% body fat, while females, often reluctantly, hold on to percentages right about 25. The typical male's body boasts 56 pounds of muscle, while the female's sports a healthy but less significant 30 pounds. A healthy male can lift twice his own body weight thanks to lungs, a heart, bones, and muscles that outweigh a female's. On average, he's 7% taller and 10% weightier than a female. Many of the human male's gifts, aside from the obvious, are evident within the womb, and particularly right after birth. Maternity staff members often note higher hemoglobin counts, longer body measurements, heavier birth weights, higher resting metabolisms, and more lively movements from the little tykes. Likewise, human male children have a propensity for horseplay, have a seemingly insatiable curiosity, and have a better visual acuteness for snails and puppy dog tails than their sugar and spice and everything nice counterparts. It seems that, even from the womb, the human male is being prepared for the tough jobs that his ancestors had assigned him. Millions of years ago, females, due mostly in part to their childbearing roles, were needed back at the home caves to raise children, to gather berries and other non-violent foods, and to keep the bedrocks warm. They were simply too indispensable in the raising of future generations to put into the field for hunting and fighting. Men could inseminate their women and then move on to provide for the tribe. Men were drawn to the harsh savannas in search of food and conquests. They were subjected to harsh weather, injury, and stress. The male bodies that were best built to survive these environmental traumas lived to procreate and pass their survival features along to their offspring. This ideal demonstrates Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. Darwin maintained, as much of the scientific community does today, that features have survived because they offered some benefit to their bearers. Many of the human male's features that we recognize today are in place because they allowed those human males not only to live through a tough day in the field, but to come home and make more babies who would carry on robust survival features. That's why distinctly male features have survived, because they worked. And they still do. Let's begin with a feature that not only allowed human males to stand erect and to run from predators that could have easily wiped out mankind, but also now keeps establishments that specialize in everything from wide widths to size 14s to odor-absorbing insoles in business. Biological evidence points to the male foot taking a walk on the wild side. If I could name the most neglected portion of the male form, it might be the foot. Why? Because the foot does not contain any major organs. It isn't part of any thought-provoking or sexually stimulating tasks, and it's generally considered to be unpleasant and merely deserving of being tucked away in a sock with an odor eater and the promise of eventual ventilation. A man's arch is generally higher than a woman's. This is likely due to early man's need for a spring-loaded step while bounding away from danger and pouncing onto prey and enemies. Humans are unique in that they walk on their entire foot. Most other mammals use only the toes or balls of their feet. For this reason, the arch was necessary for comfortable walking, which inevitably led to longer and more productive walking. Of course, we can't forget the struggling podiatrist's dream, stinky feet. Because men have larger feet, they also have more sweat glands in those feet. And when those manly boats are in their slips or shoes for too long, a bounty of smells, including cabbage, cheese, fish, and sulfur, are summoned. Products of metabolic functions of sweat-loving bacteria, these smells are far from pleasant, but your boyfriend's bouquet is, in fact, the effect of an ancient and useful tracking device. Consider this. Would you be able to tell, blindfolded, whether it's your brother or your boyfriend who's taken off his Nikes? That's because each human's chemistry harbors a different concoction of odor-causing bacteria. Though foot smell can be identified in general, it does vary from person to person. For this reason, early males were able to track each other by terrestrial scent. If a soggy-footed man was lost, injured, or being held hostage, his tribal cohorts could sniff out his track and rescue him in a grand display of comradeship. The rescued man then lived to spread his genetic material, which included a propensity for sweaty feet. However, this nifty scent tracking ability raises a question. Wouldn't the putrid scent of a man's track also draw in predators sporting big noses and empty stomachs? The famed 20th century anthropologist Louis Leakey alluded to the fact that human odor was foul enough to make early man repugnant to predators. This was due in large part to man's high-protein diet. If Leakey's theory is correct and a prehistoric dog was tracking a barefooted man, the dog would know that the creature he was following was a carnivore, a big one, and of an unknown species. Because most animals are xenophobic or fearful of the unknown, the dog may have backed off in favor of a more familiar scent. As men developed hunting and defense skills, they would have fought off many of the predators that tracked them, teaching those predators that the scent of this once unknown carnivore meant danger. Therefore, the men with the sweatiest of feet were less likely to be pursued by predators that understood how quickly they could be demoted to prey. When you consider the size of humans' feet in comparison to their tall statures and significant weights, any engineer might believe that they would topple over at a mere friendly slap on the back. A clown with long, bulging shoes looks to be in better balance proportionately than the standard-footed human, until, of course, you consider the function of the big toe. When humans' predecessors moved from branches to earth, toes that could balance and propel were much more useful than toes that could efficiently peel fruit. Opposable big toes posed serious balance issues for terrestrial walkers, and those with these outward appendages rarely made it out of the starting gate. Early humans needed mobility and speed in order to survive the harsh environments of their non-tree-dwelling existence. That's why today's human is able to use nicely aligned big toes to push off every time he or she takes a step, because natural selection effectively weeded out those terrestrial-only bipeds who had no such ability. Body watch. The forward-pointing big toe tells us a bit about man's evolution, and now the direction in which his feet point will tell you of his mind's desire. Because he doesn't consciously control the direction in which his feet aim, they're terrific indicators of his subconscious intentions. If his feet are pointing toward you, he's interested. Just as hands have fingerprints, feet also have patterns that vary from person to person. Thick skin, the type found only on the soles of the feet and the palms of the hands, grows no hair, but has one extraordinary purpose: grip. The ridges on the bottom of the foot did for early humans what a good set of radials can do for your car. Whether man was in pursuit, being pursued, climbing a tree, or bracing during copulation, grip was essential for his survival and his procreation. So let's pay the male foot a bit of respect. It may never enjoy a pedicure. It may never freshen a room. It may be less alluring in its aesthetics, its feel, and its hygiene, but for goodness sakes, let's give credit where credit is due. Without this complicated machine, one that has deemed itself worthy of an independent discipline, podiatric medicine, the entire human masculine machine may have never progressed far enough to walk into the club, the date, or your life. A long leg up on the competition. Humans are the only bipeds on Earth that gain locomotion solely on their hind legs by walking and running. Other primates will walk or run on their hind legs for a short time, and other mammals and birds will hop on their hind legs for their whole lives, but not one could run across the finish line of the New York City Marathon fully erect. With humans' upright stances had come not only a need to quickly learn to outsmart predators and prey, but a need to run like hell. Anyone who's watched the Summer Olympics knows that there's no room for stubbiness in the leg department. In fact, most Olympic athletes have legs that range from average to long, usually equating to at least half of their total height. As early humans spent time outsmarting and outrunning danger, natural selection favored those with longer legs. If you've run the high school mile next to McStretch, you can follow natural selection's virtual thought process. For every 2 of your running steps, McStretch took 1. He could gallop along at a leisurely pace while you had to disengage and dispose of your lower intestine just to make it before Mr. Gymnasium blew the whistle. Without a doubt, early humans with longer legs were much better at outrunning danger and overtaking prey. When you consider that men spent much of their time doing just this, you've got a plausible explanation for why men's legs have evolved to be longer and more lean-muscled than women's. Well-muscled legs are common characteristics of modern humans. They were also necessities for ancient humans. When we made the move to bodily erection, hind legs took on twice the workload they once had. They now had to support twice the weight and aid in twice the balance. The musculature that evolved takes credit for the straight, forward-moving, and smooth operation of today's human legs. Men's legs are often longer than women's in relation to height because boys mature more slowly than girls, which gives their legs more time to grow. This slow growth left boys of millennia past more vulnerable during puberty, but after the gawkiness lifted, they were gifted with some advantageous mechanisms on which to escape danger and to run down prey. Stumpy-limbed men were likely left behind to be mauled, consumed, and rendered irreproducible while their taller, leggier companions brought home the goods. Generally, the male's calf muscle will sit higher on his leg and appear more protrusive thanks to his extra muscle mass and his longer legs. Body watch. Often a man's indecision is made obvious by a leg position known as the asymmetrical stance. If one leg is pointed in your direction as if he's prepared to take a step towards you, but his body weight is resting on the back leg, he wants to come closer, but he's hesitant. The next time you're at the gym and Mr. Athletic saunters in, take notice of the length and the musculature of his legs. If at first glance he seems to have flawless bodily proportions, you'll probably notice, with more scrutiny, that his legs make up at least half of his height. This design contributed to his ancestors' speed in the wilds of the savannas, and today it serves to speed him right into your line of discriminating vision. Once he passes, hold on to your free weights. The rear view will hold its own parcel of evolutionary delights. The male buttocks brilliantly compose the smartest of asses. In comparison to other species, the human male has a more rounded, rather protrusive buttock region. To put it lightly, he's got a bulbous ass. Unlike the female's butt, the male's is composed primarily of muscle, the amount of which determines whether it belongs to an athlete or an accountant. So you might ask, why all the bodily exposure for muscles that do their best work on football bleachers? Ah, you've been misled. Human buttocks are nature's gift to modern men and women. People that walked the earth only 2 million years ago had no such features. In fact, their pelvises were less substantial because they were responsible for holding less buttock muscle in place. It wasn't until man learned of the benefits of long-distance running that his butt embarked on a journey of globular proportions. Once again, natural selection put in its 2 cents. The men with bigger protruding gluteus maximus muscles were not only able to outrun the wild and crazy carnivores of the savannas, they were also able to continue running for much longer than their pursuers. So while these finely buttocked men enjoyed nights at home creating more bulbous-butted babies, others had lost their asses in races with Mother Nature. The better muscled the buttock region was, the longer a human could stand upright, walk upright, and run upright. David E. Lieberman, professor of anthropology at Harvard's Faculty of Arts and Sciences, puts it best when he said, "Your gluteus maximus stabilizes your trunk as you lean forward in a run. A run is like a controlled fall, and your buttocks help to control it." For early man, the development of a well-muscled buttocks may have drawn in the cave chicks, but it also helped him to make great strides in the pursuits of health, food, wealth, and dominance. In other words, thanks to the male buttocks, the human race was able to haul ass out of some pretty sticky situations. That brings us to those body parts that have aided men throughout history.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?